Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where the sweet scent of roses mingles with the overwhelming stench of human waste, where taking a bath might literally kill you, and where your idea of clean would make a medieval person laugh until their rotting teeth fell out. You're about to discover what hygiene was really like in medieval times, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive your first week without modern antibiotics and a serious attitude adjustment about what constitutes dirty. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing how this little bedtime community spans the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake as the first pale fingers of dawn creep through the gaps in your wattle and daub walls. The year is 1347, and you're a cloth merchant in a bustling English town. Your eyes flutter open, and immediately you're hit with a symphony of smells that would send your modern self running for the nearest hazmat suit. The straw beneath you, which serves as your mattress, rustles with the movement of tiny creatures you've learned to ignore. Your woolen clothes, which you've worn for the past 3 weeks, cling to your skin with a mixture of sweat, grease, and whatever you spilled during yesterday's meal. You stretch, feeling the grime between your toes, a sensation that's become as familiar as breathing. The concept of daily bathing exists only in the realm of dangerous eccentricity, something practiced by a few odd nobles who clearly have too much time and too little sense. Water, after all, opens your pores to disease and corruption. Everyone knows this. Well, almost everyone. Your neighbor, old Henrik, claims his grandmother lived to the ripe age of 42 because she washed her face with morning dew every day. But Henrik also believes that wearing a necklace of garlic will prevent the evil eye, so his credibility is somewhat questionable. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed water was inherently dangerous, or if they simply lacked the infrastructure to make regular bathing practical. But from where you're lying in your increasingly aromatic bed, the distinction feels academic. The house begins to stir around you. Your wife rolls over, and you catch a whiff of the rosewater she dabbed behind her ears 3 days ago, a luxury that cost you nearly a week's earnings, but one that you don't regret, given the alternative. Your children begin their morning coughing ritual, a sound that echoes through medieval homes like a dawn chorus of consumption and respiratory distress. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, your bare feet touching the packed earth floor. The rushes scattered across it were fresh last month, but now they're a fascinating ecosystem of spilled food, dog waste, and mysterious stains that you've learned not to investigate too closely. The smell rises to greet you like an old, unwelcome friend. Outside your window, the town is awakening to another day of olfactory adventure. Smoke from cooking fires mingles with the sweet smell of human waste from the overflowing privies. The baker's apprentice hurries past, carrying loaves that will taste faintly of the unwashed hands that kneaded them. group of pilgrims trudges through the muddy street, their unwashed bodies creating a mobile cloud of piety and perspiration that would make modern deodorant manufacturers weep with despair. You reach for your cap, running your fingers through hair that you last washed sometime during the previous season. The grease serves as an excellent styling agent, keeping your locks in place better than any modern product could manage. Your wife often jokes that your hair could probably stand up and walk away on its own. And while she's exaggerating, you suspect it could at least manage a confident strut. This is your normal, your everyday reality in a world where cleanliness is not only next to godliness, but apparently quite far from it, possibly in another county entirely. As you prepare to face another day in medieval England, you can't help but wonder how your ancestors managed to reproduce successfully when getting close enough to another person for intimate moments required a level of nasal fortitude that bordered on the heroic. You step outside into the crisp morning air and immediately understand why your medieval ancestors viewed water with the same suspicion modern people reserve for expired milk and political promises. The local physician, Master Geoffrey, stands in the town square delivering his weekly health sermon to a gathering of skeptical villagers. His voice carries across the cobblestones as he explains, with the confidence of someone who's never heard of bacteria, why immersing yourself in water is tantamount to inviting death himself to dinner. Water, he declares, gesturing dramatically with hands that haven't seen soap in living memory, opens the pores and allows pestilence to enter the body. The wise man cleanses himself with dry linens and sweet herbs, not with the cursed wetness that breeds disease. The crowd nods sagely, many of them sporting skin conditions that would make modern dermatologists rich. But hey, at least their pores are safely closed. You remember your father telling you stories of the old Roman bathhouses, magnificent structures where people would gather to soak in heated pools and socialize. But those were different times, when people apparently didn't understand the inherent dangers of combining human bodies with large quantities of water. Historians still argue whether the medieval fear of bathing stemmed from genuine medical beliefs or simply from practical concerns about water quality and availability. But standing here listening to Master Geoffrey's passionate anti-bath rhetoric, you suspect the former. The irony isn't lost on you that in a world where people drink weak ale for breakfast because the water isn't safe, they've somehow concluded that external contact with H2O is equally perilous. Your local brewery does a booming business precisely because their fermented beverages are safer than what comes out of the well. Yet the idea of using that same questionable water to wash your body is considered downright suicidal. Master Geoffrey continues his lecture, explaining how the ancient Greeks and Romans who indulged in regular bathing were clearly corrupted by their pagan practices. Notice, he says with a knowing wink, how their empires fell. Coincidence? I think not. The crowd murmurs in agreement, apparently finding this logic as sound as a cathedral bell, though you suspect the fall of Rome might have involved slightly more complex factors than excessive cleanliness. You watch as a wealthy merchant's wife hurries past, her body servant struggling to keep up while carrying an enormous bundle of fine linen cloths. She's practicing the approved method of medieval hygiene, dry cleaning. Every morning, she has her servant rub her down vigorously with these expensive fabrics, which are supposed to absorb the night's accumulation of bodily unpleasantness. It's like trying to clean a dirty window with a dry cloth. Technically, you're moving the dirt around, but calling it cleaning requires a generous interpretation of the word. A local monastery, visible on the hill beyond the town walls, represents a slightly different approach to the water question. The monks there have managed to convince themselves that occasional washing is acceptable when performed as a spiritual discipline rather than for personal comfort. They've developed an elaborate system of justifications that would make modern lawyers proud. Washing for feast days, washing for important visitors, washing when absolutely necessary for health reasons. It's theological loophole finding at its finest. Brother Francis, who visits the town monthly to collect donations, once confided to you that the monastery's communal bath gets used about 4 times a year, with all the monks taking turns in the same water. By the time the novices get their turn, you imagine the water has achieved a consistency somewhere between soup and mortar. But apparently it still counts as spiritual cleansing. Young Thomas, the apprentice blacksmith, bounces past, his clothes so stiff with accumulated sweat and soot that they've essentially become a form of flexible armor. He grins and waves, seemingly unbothered by the fact that he's become a walking advertisement for the concept of personal funk. His master often jokes that Thomas doesn't need protective gear when working the forge because his natural coating provides adequate heat resistance. The morning progresses, and you notice how naturally people maintain what you might call aromatic distance from each other. Conversations happen at arm's length, not from rudeness, but from a mutual understanding that getting too close might result in sensory overload. It's a delicate social dance that your ancestors have perfected over generations of shared olfactory challenge. You make your way through the market square, weaving between vendors whose personal hygiene philosophies range from occasionally acceptable to aggressively medieval. The fishmonger's stall attacks your nostrils with a combination of yesterday's catch and what you suspect might be last year's personal bathing schedule. His wife stands beside him, her apron so encrusted with scales and unidentifiable stains that it could probably qualify as a historical artifact if anyone were brave enough to preserve it for posterity. The reality of medieval hygiene hits you like a wooden cart loaded with manure, which, coincidentally, has just rumbled past, adding another layer to the town's complex aromatic bouquet. For the vast majority of people, those who work the fields, tend the animals, and craft the goods that keep society functioning, cleanliness is a luxury more exotic than silk or spices. These are people whose hands haven't been properly clean since childhood, whose clothes are passed down through generations like family heirlooms. accumulating decades of human experience in their fibers. You spot Margaret the baker, her arms white with flour dust that mingles with the more permanent grime of her trade. She's been kneading bread since before dawn, her hands working the dough with fingers that haven't seen soap, because soap, when you can find it, costs more than most people earn in a week. The bread she produces feeds half the town, and while it might carry the faint essence of unwashed baker, it's still infinitely preferable to starvation. Her children help in the bakery, their small hands creating child-sized handprints in the dough, adding what you might charitably call rustic character to the daily bread. Historians still argue whether medieval people were genuinely unbothered by their collective aromatic situation, or if they simply developed the world's most impressive case of olfactory adaptation. But watching the seamless way people interact despite their obvious fragrant challenges, you suspect the latter. It's like living in a world where everyone has agreed to pretend that a particularly pungent elephant isn't standing in every room. The wool merchant's family exemplifies the medieval approach to textile hygiene. Their clothes, passed down through 3 generations, have achieved a patina that's part family history, part biological experiment. The father's tunic, originally a cheerful blue, has faded to a color that might be described as medieval brown, a shade achieved not through dye, but through the accumulated evidence of daily life. His children wear smaller versions of the same garments, their clothes growing with them like a second skin that's never quite shed. You pass a group of farmers heading home from the fields, their boots caked with mud that contains ingredients you prefer not to contemplate too deeply. They laugh and chat easily, their camaraderie undiminished by the fact that they could probably be tracked by scent alone. One of them, Old William, claims he hasn't removed his boots in 2 months because he's afraid of what he might find underneath. His friends find this hilarious rather than horrifying, which tells you everything you need to know about medieval standards. The children playing in the street represent the future of medieval hygiene, which is to say, they're being trained from birth to accept aromatic challenges that would send modern humans fleeing for the hills. They roll in dirt, splash through puddles of questionable origin, and seem utterly unbothered by the fact that their clothes could probably stand up and play by themselves. Their games include classics like Chase the Pig, Avoid the Chamber Pot Contents, and see who can get dirtiest before supper. A traveling merchant stops to water his horses at the public trough, and you notice how the animals seem more discriminating about water quality than their human counterparts. The horses sniff carefully before drinking, while the merchant himself hasn't been particularly selective about anything he's consumed in recent memory, judging by the state of his clothes and the creative way he's managed to distribute food stains across his entire outfit. The town's laundress, one of the few people whose profession requires regular contact with water, has developed a practical approach to cleanliness that involves cleaning other people's clothes while maintaining her own at a level that could kindly be called lived in. She pounds the garments against rocks in the stream, using ash-based soap when available, which is roughly as often as eclipses and royal visits. You climb the winding path toward the castle, your merchant's credentials granting you access to witness how the other half lives, which, as it turns out, isn't significantly cleaner than your half, just more expensive about it. The castle's great hall looms before you, its tapestries depicting noble hunting scenes that, ironically, are probably cleaner than the nobles themselves. As you approach the massive oak doors, a wave of competing fragrances hits you like a perfumed sledgehammer. Rosewater, lavender, musk, and underneath it all, the unmistakable essence of unwashed human nobility. Lord Edmund greets you with the enthusiasm of someone who desperately needs your cloth, but must maintain the pretense that he's doing you an enormous favor by allowing you to sell it to him. His velvet doublet, worth more than your house, has been liberally doused with expensive Persian rosewater in what appears to be an ongoing battle between luxury and biology. The rosewater is losing, but putting up a valiant fight that you have to admire for its optimism, if not its effectiveness. Lady Margaret glides past in a gown that cost more than most people see in a lifetime, her silk sleeves trailing through rushes that haven't been changed since the last feast day. She's perfumed herself with a combination of oils and powders that would make a modern department store smell conservative by comparison. Yet somehow, the overall effect still suggests that beneath all that expensive aromatherapy lies a human being who hasn't had a proper wash since the Norman conquest. The noble approach to hygiene involves what you might call aggressive masking. If you can't eliminate the problem, overwhelm it with solutions so expensive that people will assume you must be clean. Historians still argue whether medieval nobles actually believed their perfumes made them hygienic, or if they were simply engaged in the world's earliest form of chemical warfare against their own bodily functions. But watching Lady Margaret reapply her rosewater for the third time in 10 minutes, you suspect they knew exactly what they were fighting. Young Sir Geoffrey, barely old enough to grow a proper beard, but already displaying the confidence of someone who's never had to question whether he smells, demonstrates the noble art of strategic garment arrangement. His expensive clothes are designed with multiple layers, the theory being that if the innermost layer becomes uninhabitable, you simply add another one on top. He's currently sporting what appears to be 3 tunics, 2 doublets, and a partridge in a pear tree, creating a mobile monument to the medieval philosophy of dealing with hygiene through sheer fabric abundance. The castle's dining hall presents a fascinating study in how wealth can't actually solve certain fundamental human problems, though it can certainly dress them up in finer clothes. The long tables are set with silver plate and expensive linens, but the people eating off them haven't changed their undergarments since the last feast, which was 3 weeks ago. The irony of eating with unwashed hands off meticulously cleaned silver is apparently lost on everyone except you and possibly the mice, who seem to maintain higher standards of personal cleanliness than their human counterparts. You notice how the nobles have perfected the art of graceful distance, maintaining conversation while staying just far enough apart to avoid overwhelming each other with their competing aromatic strategies. It's like watching a complex dance where everyone knows the steps, but nobody wants to admit why they're necessary. Lord Edmund gestures expansively while discussing the latest political developments, his movements calculated to ensure maximum air circulation around his person. The castle's chapel, where the family gathers for daily prayers, represents the ultimate test of medieval olfactory endurance. 40 people packed into a relatively small space, all convinced that their expensive perfumes make them socially acceptable, create an atmosphere that could probably be classified as a weapon of mass destruction under modern conventions. The priest, Father Bernard, has developed an impressive ability to deliver sermons while breathing almost entirely through his mouth, a skill that probably wasn't covered in seminary, but has proven invaluable in his current position. Lady Catherine's ladies-in-waiting cluster around her like aromatic satellites, each trying to out-perfume the others in a competition that has no winners, only degrees of olfactory assault. They giggle and whisper behind silk fans, the fans serving double duty as social accessories and emergency air filtration systems. Their morning routine involves applying layer upon layer of scented oils, powders, and waters in combinations that would make a modern chemist weep. The castle's guest chambers, where visiting nobles stay, have been equipped with special herbs scattered among the rushes and pomanders hanging from the walls, creating an environment that's part bedroom, part aromatherapy clinic, and part desperate attempt to maintain the illusion that wealth equals cleanliness. The servants who clean these rooms have developed respiratory systems that could probably filter coal smoke, which is fortunate given their working conditions. You wake the next morning with a toothache that feels like someone has taken up residence in your jaw with a tiny hammer and an aggressive work ethic. This presents you with a delightful medieval dilemma: suffer in silence or seek help from the local tooth puller, whose medical training consists primarily of enthusiasm and a remarkably strong grip. Your mouth tastes like something died in it, which isn't entirely inaccurate given the state of medieval dental hygiene. And you realize that your morning breath could probably be weaponized if properly concentrated. The medieval approach to dental care operates on the principle that teeth are essentially temporary fixtures. Like roof shingles or marriage vows, they'll last as long as they last. And when they don't, you make do with whatever's left. Your neighbor, Goodwife Alice, grins at you with what remains of her smile, a collection of brown stumps and strategic gaps that would make a modern orthodontist either very wealthy or very drunk. She's 43 years old and considers herself fortunate to have any teeth at all, which puts your current dental drama into perspective. You trudge through the morning streets, your jaw throbbing in rhythm with your footsteps, and notice how many people have perfected the art of closed-mouth communication. Open-mouthed laughter is rare not just because life is hard, but because medieval breath could clear a room faster than news of the plague. The baker's wife speaks exclusively through clenched teeth, not from unfriendliness, but from a practical understanding that her morning exhalations could probably violate several local ordinances if they had any. Master Edmund, the tooth puller, operates out of a stall in the market square, advertising his services with a collection of extracted teeth hanging from strings like macabre party decorations. His clientele includes everyone from farmers to minor nobles, all united in their shared commitment to avoiding his services until absolutely necessary. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the connection between diet and dental health. But watching Master Edmund's customers emerge from his stall looking like they've been personally introduced to the concept of suffering, you suspect they were more focused on immediate survival than long-term oral health planning. The tools of medieval dentistry would make modern torture devices seem humane by comparison. Master Edmund's kit includes pliers that look like they were borrowed from a blacksmith, various hooks and probes that appear to have been designed by someone with a deep understanding of human anatomy and a complete absence of sympathy, and a leather strap for patients to bite down on, because apparently the irony of damaging your remaining teeth while having one removed was lost on medieval medical professionals. You observe a dental extraction from a safe distance, watching as Master Edmund wrestles with a tooth that seems determined to take part of the patient's jaw with it. The patient, a farmer named Tom, grips the arms of his chair with the intensity of someone trying to crush diamonds into dust with his bare hands. The sound effects alone are enough to make you reconsider the severity of your own toothache. It's a symphony of scraping, cracking, and muffled screaming that would make modern horror movies seem quaint. The medieval dental care routine involves chewing on twigs, rinsing with wine when available, and praying to several saints who specialize in oral suffering. Some people rub their teeth with coarse cloth in an attempt to remove the visible evidence of their dietary choices, though this often results in wearing away the enamel along with the stains, creating a self-defeating cycle that would be hilarious if it weren't so universally practiced. Young Peter, the apprentice, demonstrates the medieval solution to persistent bad breath, carrying a small pouch of herbs and spices to chew throughout the day. His breath now smells like a combination of mint, cloves, and the underlying foundation of dental decay that no amount of herbal intervention can completely mask. It's like trying to cover the smell of a barnyard with a single flower, technically an improvement, but not quite achieving the desired effect. The wealthy approach dental hygiene with the same philosophy they apply to everything else. Throw expensive solutions at the problem and hope for the best. Lady Margaret's teeth have been cleaned with a mixture of ground pumice and wine, a process that removes stains and enamel with equal efficiency. Her smile sparkles in the candlelight, though whether from cleanliness or the absence of tooth surface is difficult to determine. The castle's chapel includes special prayers for dental relief, suggesting that medieval tooth pain was considered both a medical condition and a spiritual trial. Father Bernard delivers sermons about the virtues of suffering, while discreetly massaging his own jaw, indicating that even those with direct access to divine intervention sometimes need a little extra help with their oral health challenges. Your toothache has evolved from a dull throb to what feels like a personal vendetta between your molar and your sanity. So you reluctantly make your way to Master William's establishment, where the painted pole outside cheerfully advertises his triple threat of services: haircuts, surgery, and dentistry. The red and white stripes aren't just decorative. They represent blood and bandages, which should probably give you pause. But when your face feels like it's hosting a medieval rave, even questionable medical intervention starts looking attractive. Master William greets you with the confidence of someone who's never heard of medical malpractice lawsuits. His leather apron decorated with stains that tell the story of his morning's work in alarming detail. His hands, which haven't seen soap since soap was invented, are currently bloody from his previous patient's minor procedure. But he seems unconcerned about this as he gestures for you to sit in his wooden chair, which bears suspicious scratches that suggest previous occupants may have attempted to claw their way to freedom. The medieval barber operates on the principle that the human body is basically a machine that occasionally needs aggressive maintenance, like a particularly temperamental cart that requires frequent hammering to keep working. His tools hang on the wall like a museum exhibit dedicated to creative interpretations of medical equipment. Razors that could double as weapons, saws that look borrowed from the local carpenter, and a collection of metal implements whose original purposes have been lost to time and bloodstains. You watch as he prepares for your dental procedure by wiping his hands on his apron, which transfers roughly the same amount of dirt from his palms to the fabric as it removes, achieving the medical equivalent of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Historians still argue whether medieval barber surgeons actually believed their methods were hygienic, or if they were simply working with the best available technology. But from your position in the chair of doom, the distinction feels academic. Master William begins his examination by poking your infected tooth with a metal probe that he's thoughtfully warmed in the morning fire, because apparently room temperature agony wasn't quite sufficient for his standards. His breath, which carries the aromatic complexity of someone who's been taste testing his own dental remedies, mingles with yours to create an atmospheric condition that could probably be used to tan leather. The probe finds its target with the accuracy of someone who's had plenty of practice causing precise discomfort. The extraction process involves Master William gripping your tooth with pliers that look like they were designed for pulling nails out of coffins, which may not be entirely coincidental given the medieval understanding of medicine. He braces one foot against your chair and begins pulling with the enthusiasm of someone trying to start a particularly stubborn mule, while you grip the chair arms and wonder if this is how your ancestors felt when they invented the concept of the good old days. Young Robin, Master William's apprentice, assists by holding your head steady and offering encouraging words like "it's almost over" and "try not to move so much," while you contemplate the irony that in a few hundred years, people will have dentistry that doesn't involve what essentially amounts to a medieval wrestling match between your face and a man with questionable credentials and unwashed hands. The tooth finally surrenders with a sound like breaking kindling, and Master William holds it up triumphantly, as if he's just slain a dragon rather than performed what future generations will consider routine dental care. The hole in your mouth feels roughly the size of a wine barrel, but Master William assures you this is normal as he presses a handful of herbs into the socket with fingers that have been personally introduced to every previous patient's blood supply. The bleeding is controlled with a mixture of ground herbs and what appears to be ash from the morning fire, creating a paste that Master William applies with the confidence of someone who's never heard of infection control. He explains that the bleeding will stop when it's ready, which isn't exactly the precise medical timeline you were hoping for, but apparently medieval dentistry operates on its own schedule. The bill for this adventure includes not just the tooth extraction, but also a haircut and beard trim, because Master William believes in providing comprehensive service even when you're trying not to pass out from dental trauma. Your hair is cut with the same razor he used for surgery, which he's wiped clean on his apron between procedures, demonstrating the medieval commitment to equipment efficiency, if not exactly sterility. Your post-dental extraction recovery is interrupted by nature's most insistent call, presenting you with another delightful aspect of medieval hygiene, the fascinating world of waste management, or as your ancestors might have called it, the daily challenge of not poisoning yourself with your own bodily functions. You make your way to the back of your house, where your privy stands like a small wooden monument to human necessity and questionable engineering decisions. The medieval approach to toilet facilities operates on the principle that what goes in must come out, and where it comes out is more of a suggestion than a carefully planned infrastructure project. Your family privy, shared with 3 neighboring households, consists of a wooden seat positioned over a pit that's reached what you might charitably call capacity. The previous week's rain has created an aromatic soup below that would make modern environmental scientists weep. But hey, at least it's your own family's contribution to the neighborhood ambience. You settle onto the wooden seat, which has been worn smooth by generations of your ancestors who faced the same daily challenge, and contemplate the medieval toilet paper situation. A basket beside you contains an assortment of materials that previous users have deemed suitable for personal hygiene. Scraps of old linen, handfuls of hay, and what appears to be several pages from a religious text that someone apparently felt could serve dual purposes. The irony of using sacred writings for such earthly needs is probably lost on most people, though you suspect the local priest might have opinions if he knew. The view from your privy includes the neighbor's vegetable garden, which flourishes with suspicious vigor thanks to the natural fertilization provided by the overflowing waste pits. Medieval people have discovered that human waste makes excellent plant food, though they haven't quite figured out the sanitary implications of growing food directly adjacent to where they dispose of bodily waste. Historians still argue whether this proximity was intentional agricultural planning or simply the result of limited space and even more limited understanding of disease transmission. But the tomatoes certainly seem happy about the arrangement. Castle living presents an entirely different set of waste management challenges, as you learned during your recent visit to Lord Edmund's estate. The noble solution involves guardrobes, small chambers built into the castle walls that empty directly into the moat below, because, apparently, the medieval approach to sewage treatment was let the fish deal with it. You watched in fascination as Lady Margaret delicately navigated her way to the guardrobe, her silk skirts carefully lifted to avoid contact with anything that might compromise their expensive elegance. The castle's guardrobe empties with a splash that echoes through the courtyard like a regular reminder of human biological reality. No matter how many layers of silk and velvet you drape over it. The castle's fish, assuming any have survived the regular dietary supplements, have probably evolved digestive systems that could process anything, making them the medieval equivalent of aquatic superheroes with very specialized powers. Urban waste management in your town operates on the time-honored principle of someone else's problem, with chamber pot contents regularly tossed from upper-story windows into the streets below. The morning cry of Gardaloo, a helpful warning that translates roughly to duck or be decorated, has become as much a part of the urban soundtrack as church bells and merchant calls. You've developed the reflexes of a medieval ninja, capable of dodging airborne waste with the agility of someone whose survival depends on quick reactions and good timing. The town's official waste collection system involves a cart that makes weekly rounds, collecting the accumulated contents of public latrines and private waste pits for transport to agricultural areas outside the town walls. The cart's driver, Old Bernard, has developed a philosophical approach to his work that involves heavy drinking and breathing exclusively through his mouth, creating a professional demeanor that's part stoic acceptance, part survival strategy. Public latrines in the market square represent medieval democracy in action. Everyone's waste is equally welcome, regardless of social status or personal hygiene standards. The multi-seat arrangement encourages social interaction during bodily functions, leading to conversations that modern people would find either charmingly communal or utterly horrifying, depending on their tolerance for discussing grain prices while conducting personal business. Monastery's approach to waste management combines practical necessity with spiritual discipline, creating elaborate rules about appropriate times and methods for bodily functions that turn basic human biology into a theological exercise. Brother Francis once explained that even waste elimination can be performed to the glory of God, though you suspect the novices would prefer a slightly less spiritually demanding interpretation of bathroom duties. You wake to the familiar sensation of tiny feet dancing across your scalp, and realize that your hair has become prime real estate in the medieval housing market for creatures that didn't exactly sign a lease. Your head itches with the persistence of someone trying to scratch an itch on the inside of their skull, and you know that today's grooming routine will involve a careful inspection of your scalp for tenants who have been subletting space without permission, and definitely without paying rent. The medieval relationship with lice operates on the principle of grudging coexistence. They're going to live in your hair, whether you like it or not. So you might as well develop strategies for managing the situation that don't involve burning your head off. Your wife sits beside the window, systematically working through your hair with a fine-toothed comb made from bone, hunting for the tiny invaders with the concentration of someone panning for gold. Except the gold is lice, and finding it is considerably less exciting. You marvel at how lice have achieved what medieval humans can only dream of: perfect hygiene. These tiny creatures keep themselves meticulously clean while living in conditions that would make a pig reconsider its life choices. They've set up housekeeping in hair that hasn't been properly washed since the last feast day. Yet somehow they maintain personal standards that put their human hosts to shame. It's like having the world's cleanest roommates in the world's dirtiest apartment. Young Tom, the apprentice baker, demonstrates the medieval approach to flea management by periodically stopping his work to scratch vigorously at his legs, creating a rhythmic scratching that accompanies his bread kneading like a primitive percussion instrument. His clothes, which haven't been changed in recent memory, have become a mobile ecosystem supporting a diverse population of jumping insects that seem genuinely happy with their living arrangements, even if Tom seems less enthusiastic about the partnership. The wealthy approach to vermin control involves expensive solutions that work about as well as you'd expect from medieval pest management. Lady Catherine's silk gowns are regularly treated with herbs and oils that are supposed to repel insects, though the evidence suggests that medieval fleas are either illiterate or completely unimpressed by expensive aromatherapy. She maintains her dignity while scratching discreetly behind her fan, proving that even vermin infestations can be handled with proper etiquette if you're sufficiently committed to maintaining appearances. Historians still argue whether medieval people genuinely accepted their arthropod companions as inevitable, or if they were simply working with the best available technology for pest control. But watching the seamless way people incorporate scratching into their daily routines suggests a level of adaptation that would impress modern survival experts. It's like watching an entire civilization that's learned to function normally while constantly uncomfortable. The castle's great hall during feast times becomes a fascinating study in competitive scratching, as nobles and servants alike attempt to maintain dinner conversation while dealing with their respective insect populations. You watch Lord Edmund deliver a passionate speech about land management while systematically working his way around various itchy spots, his movements so practiced that he can scratch behind his ear under his arm, and along his leg without missing a single political point. The children in your neighborhood have turned lice picking into a social activity, gathering in small groups to help each other hunt for the tiny invaders with the enthusiasm of treasure hunters. They've developed a point system where finding a particularly large louse earns bragging rights, and they trade tips about the best hunting techniques with the seriousness of military strategists. It's heartwarming to see young people finding community activities, even if those activities involve systematic removal of parasites from each other's scalps. Bedbugs represent another level of medieval cohabitation, turning your nightly rest into a feeding opportunity for creatures that have perfected the art of nocturnal blood extraction. Your straw mattress has become a luxury resort for insects that appreciate the all-you-can-eat buffet that your family provides nightly. You've learned to sleep through the sensation of tiny mouths sampling your blood supply, which is either impressive adaptation or concerning resignation to your fate as a human juice box. The local church includes special prayers for relief from vermin, suggesting that medieval people understood their pest problems were serious enough to require divine intervention. Father Bernard delivers sermons about patience and suffering while discreetly dealing with his own flea population, proving that even those with direct access to God sometimes need a little extra help with their six-legged congregation members. Fleas have achieved something approaching celebrity status in medieval society, with some people naming particularly persistent individuals and treating them almost like pets that happen to feed on human blood. Old Henrik claims to have had the same flea for 3 months, which he's named Geoffrey after his least favorite neighbor, and speaks of it with the fond exasperation usually reserved for beloved but troublesome relatives. You observe the medieval world through the lens of someone who's never had to manage monthly biological functions while wearing layers of unwashable wool and living in a society that considers discussing women's health roughly equivalent to practicing witchcraft. The women in your community have developed an intricate system of coping mechanisms that would impress modern engineers for their creativity and horrify modern doctors for their complete absence of sanitary principles. Goodwife Martha, your neighbor's wife, demonstrates the medieval approach to feminine hygiene with a combination of resourcefulness and resignation that characterizes most aspects of medieval life. Her monthly routine involves strips of linen cloth that are washed when possible and reused until they achieve the structural integrity of wet paper, supplemented by whatever absorbent materials she can find: moss, wool scraps, and occasionally clean rags if she's particularly fortunate or well prepared. Wealthy women at the castle have access to finer linen and more frequent washing, but even Lady Margaret's monthly challenges involve cloth strips that are cleaned by servants who understand that discussing such matters requires the discretion usually reserved for state secrets. The castle's laundresses have developed a specialized knowledge of stain removal that would make modern cleaning product manufacturers take notes, though their methods involve primarily cold water, ash-based soap, and optimism. Medieval medicine approaches women's monthly cycles with the same confident ignorance that characterizes most medieval medical practice, combining genuine observation with theories that seem designed by someone who's never actually spoken to a woman about her experiences. Master Geoffrey, the physician, explains that monthly bleeding is caused by an excess of humors that must be expelled, and recommends treatments that range from herbal teas to bloodletting, because apparently the solution to monthly blood loss is additional voluntary blood loss. You notice how women have developed subtle communication systems for managing their monthly needs, sharing information and supplies through networks that operate below the radar of male awareness. They've perfected the art of discreet cloth management, strategic layering, and the careful timing of activities to minimize both discomfort and social awkwardness. It's like watching an underground resistance movement dedicated to managing biological functions with dignity, despite living in a world designed by people who have never had periods. Historians still argue whether medieval women's menstrual practices were significantly different from earlier periods, but observing the creative solutions employed by women who must manage monthly bleeding while wearing multiple layers of wool in a world without reliable washing facilities suggests that necessity has indeed mothered a considerable amount of invention, even if that invention isn't well documented in historical records written primarily by men. The monastery's approach to women's health involves a combination of prayer, herbal remedies, and carefully not thinking too hard about the specifics of female biology. Brother Francis prepares herbal teas for women's monthly complaints with the dedicated ignorance of someone who understands that certain aspects of human experience are best approached through faith rather than detailed medical knowledge. Young women learning to manage their monthly cycles receive instruction from their mothers and female relatives in whispered conversations that take place away from male family members, creating an educational system that operates entirely through female networks. The knowledge passed down includes practical tips about cloth folding, pain management with available herbs, and the social strategies necessary for maintaining normal activities while dealing with medieval menstrual management. The connection between women's monthly cycles and lunar cycles has created a body of folklore that treats menstruation as both natural phenomenon and mystical experience, leading to traditions around timing activities according to moon phases and treating monthly bleeding as a connection to larger cosmic rhythms. Whether this represents genuine spiritual insight or simply medieval people's tendency to find mystical explanations for biological processes is difficult to determine, but it certainly makes the monthly experience feel more significant than simple biological inconvenience. Working women, those who labor in fields, markets, and workshops, must manage their monthly cycles while maintaining their economic productivity, leading to practical solutions that prioritize function over comfort. The baker's wife continues kneading bread, the farmer's daughter keeps working in the fields, and the merchant's wife maintains her business dealings, all while managing monthly bleeding with whatever materials they can find and whatever time they can spare for personal care. Year 1348 arrives like an unwelcome relative who brings disaster instead of gifts. And suddenly, your community's relaxed attitude toward hygiene undergoes the medieval equivalent of a complete personality change. The Black Death has reached your town, and with it comes a panic-driven revolution in cleanliness practices that would be impressive if it weren't motivated by the very real possibility that everyone you know might be dead by Christmas. You watch as people who haven't voluntarily touched soap in their entire lives suddenly develop an intense interest in cleaning everything within reach, as if they can scrub away the invisible threat that's already killed a third of the next town over. Master Geoffrey, the physician, who spent years explaining why water was dangerous, now recommends washing with wine and vinegar, apparently having concluded that the plague represents a greater threat than open pores, though his medical reasoning remains as scientifically sound as medieval understanding allows. The transformation is remarkable to witness. Your neighbor Henrik, who previously considered changing his shirt a seasonal activity, now washes his hands multiple times daily with a mixture of herbs and ash that leaves his skin raw, but presumably less plague-hospitable. His wife has begun cleaning their house with an intensity that suggests she's trying to remove not just dirt, but the very concept of disease from their living space, scrubbing surfaces that haven't been cleaned since they were installed. Historians still argue whether the plague actually improved medieval hygiene practices long-term or simply created temporary panic that faded once the immediate threat passed. But watching your community's frantic cleaning efforts, you suspect that genuine terror can accomplish what years of medical advice couldn't, making people actually care about being clean, at least until they're reasonably sure they're going to survive. The wealthy approach plague prevention with the same philosophy they apply to everything else. Throw expensive solutions at the problem and hope that money can purchase immunity. Lord Edmund has imported exotic spices to burn in his chambers, creating aromatic smoke that's supposed to purify the air, while Lady Margaret wears a pomander filled with costly herbs that she believes will protect her from contaminated vapors. Whether these measures work is unclear, but they certainly make the castle smell like an expensive spice market. The church responds to the plague with a combination of increased prayers and surprisingly practical hygiene advice, suggesting that even medieval religious authorities understand that divine intervention works best when combined with basic sanitation. Father Bernard delivers sermons about spiritual cleanliness while encouraging his congregation to also pursue physical cleanliness, creating a theological framework that makes hygiene a religious duty rather than mere vanity. Public spaces undergo dramatic transformations as communities attempt to create plague-resistant environments through intensive cleaning. The market square, which previously featured a rich ecosystem of organic waste and casual disposal practices, is now swept and scrubbed daily by volunteers who understand that their survival might depend on their willingness to touch surfaces that haven't been cleaned in living memory. The town's physicians, barber surgeons, and anyone else with medical pretensions suddenly become experts in plague prevention, offering advice that ranges from genuinely helpful to completely ridiculous. Master William, the barber surgeon, recommends bleeding patients to remove corrupt humors, while also suggesting that people wash their instruments with wine, creating a medical approach that combines medieval theory with accidentally effective sanitation practices. You notice how quickly social norms around cleanliness can change when survival is at stake. Conversations that previously included casual scratching and comfortable aromatic distance now feature people maintaining careful physical separation and expressing genuine concern about each other's hygiene practices. It's like watching an entire society develop social anxiety disorder, except the anxiety is justified and the stakes are existential. The plague's impact on laundry practices creates a boom time for the town's washerwomen, who suddenly find themselves in unprecedented demand as people desperately attempt to clean clothes that haven't been properly washed in months or years. The local stream becomes crowded with people beating dirt out of garments with an intensity that suggests they're trying to pound the plague out of the fabric, along with the accumulated grime. Children who previously rolled in dirt with joyful abandon are now scrubbed by parents who have concluded that cleanliness might literally be the difference between life and death. The transformation of medieval children from happy dirt magnets to reluctantly clean survivors represents one of the most dramatic behavioral changes in your community, though the children seem less enthusiastic about this development than their parents. You kneel in the dim candlelight of St. Mary's Chapel, surrounded by the musty scent of unwashed wool and incense, contemplating the complex relationship between physical cleanliness and spiritual purity that defines medieval religious life. The stone floor beneath your knees has been worn smooth by generations of penitent believers, most of whom brought their own aromatic contributions to the sacred space, creating an atmosphere where devotion mingles with the unmistakable evidence of human biology. Father Bernard delivers his weekly sermon on the virtues of spiritual cleanliness, while standing behind a pulpit that bears the accumulated fingerprints and bodily oils of countless previous sermons, his unwashed hands turning the pages of a sacred text that's probably cleaner than most of the people reading it. His message emphasizes that while the body may be corrupted by earthly existence, the soul can be purified through prayer, penance, and the occasional bath when absolutely necessary for health reasons. The medieval church has developed an intricate theology around cleanliness that manages to make physical hygiene both spiritually suspect and occasionally spiritually required, depending on circumstances that seem to change based on factors ranging from feast days to papal moods. Bathing for pleasure is considered vanity, but bathing for health is acceptable, while bathing for spiritual purification occupies a theological gray area that requires careful navigation by both clergy and congregation. You observe how the monastery on the hill manages the tension between spiritual discipline and basic sanitation, as the monks have convinced themselves that their communal bathing schedule serves spiritual rather than hygienic purposes. Brother Francis explains that their quarterly baths represent a form of ritual purification that connects them to biblical traditions of spiritual cleansing, though you suspect the other monks appreciate the practical benefits as much as the theological ones. Historians still argue whether medieval religious attitudes actually hindered hygiene development or simply provided convenient justification for practices that were primarily driven by practical limitations. But listening to Father Bernard's careful explanations of when washing is spiritually appropriate versus spiritually questionable, you suspect that theology and practicality were more intertwined than either side wants to admit. The concept of holy water represents the medieval attempt to reconcile the spiritual benefits of water with the medical dangers of actual bathing, creating a religious practice that allows believers to experience symbolic cleansing without the perceived health risks of full-body water contact. You watch congregants cross themselves with water that's been blessed, but probably hasn't been changed since the last feast day, creating a spiritual experience that's heavy on symbolism and light on actual sanitation. St. Thomas Becket's shrine attracts pilgrims who have traveled hundreds of miles without changing clothes or washing, creating gatherings of the devout that could probably be detected by scent alone from several towns away. The spiritual benefits of pilgrimage apparently outweigh the practical challenges of traveling for weeks in the same clothes, though you suspect the saint might appreciate visitors who arrived slightly less aromatic, even if their devotion is unquestionable. The church's calendar includes special feast days that permit or even encourage bathing, creating religious events that serve double duty as spiritual observances and community hygiene opportunities. Easter and Christmas become occasions for both spiritual renewal and the rare treat of clean clothes, though the timing means that any cleanliness achieved is quickly compromised by the lack of regular washing facilities. Confession provides an opportunity for spiritual cleansing that doesn't require water, allowing believers to purify their souls through honest admission of wrongdoing, while maintaining the physical evidence of their earthly existence. You kneel in the confessional booth, sharing your sins with Father Bernard through a wooden screen that probably contains its own fascinating collection of whispered secrets and exhaled breath from generations of penitents. The monastery's scriptorium, where monks copy religious texts, represents one of the cleaner medieval workspaces, as the brothers understand that ink and parchment require careful handling that's incompatible with excessively dirty hands. The monks who work there develop specialized hand-washing routines that serve the practical purpose of preserving their materials while maintaining the spiritual discipline of their calling, creating a rare intersection where hygiene and holiness genuinely complement each other. religious festivals bring entire communities together in celebration that combines spiritual devotion with the social reality of hundreds of unwashed people gathering in enclosed spaces, creating atmospheric conditions that test both faith and nasal endurance. The Feast of St. John features processions through town that become mobile clouds of combined human sense, proving that spiritual joy can triumph over even the most challenging olfactory circumstances. You stand at your window as the first light of what will become the Renaissance creeps across the medieval landscape, bringing with it whispers of change that will eventually transform everything you know about cleanliness, though you won't live to see most of it unfold. The year is 1401, and rumors from distant lands speak of new ideas about health, new understanding of disease, and even new approaches to the ancient human challenge of staying clean in a world that seems designed to make cleanliness impossible. A traveling merchant from Venice shares stories of bathhouses that have begun reopening in Italian cities, places where people gather not out of desperation, but from a growing belief that regular washing might actually be beneficial rather than dangerous. His tales seem as fantastical as stories of dragons, yet he speaks with the conviction of someone who's personally witnessed these marvels, describing heated rooms filled with steam and people who bathe weekly rather than seasonally. Young scholars returning from universities in Paris and Bologna bring books that challenge Master Jeffrey's long-held medical theories, introducing concepts that suggest water might not be the enemy of human health after all. These new ideas spread through conversations in taverns and marketplaces, carried by people who've never seen a proper bathhouse, but are beginning to imagine that their great-grandchildren might live in a world where cleanliness doesn't require choosing between hygiene and survival. You notice subtle changes in your own community. The baker's wife has begun washing her hands between handling different types of dough, not from medical knowledge, but from a growing sense that cleanliness might actually improve her bread rather than endanger her health. The local physician has quietly started recommending more frequent washing for certain conditions, though he still maintains that excessive bathing opens dangerous pathways for disease. Historians still argue whether the Renaissance truly revolutionized hygiene practices or simply made existing knowledge more widespread. But watching these small changes accumulate in your medieval town, you sense that something fundamental is shifting in how people think about the relationship between cleanliness and health, even if the practical implications won't be fully realized for generations. The monastery has begun experimenting with more frequent communal bathing, though they frame it as spiritual discipline rather than medical innovation, proving that even revolutionary changes must be introduced within acceptable cultural frameworks. Brother Francis mentions that the newer novices seem less resistant to regular washing, suggesting that attitudes are evolving even within institutions traditionally resistant to change. Lady Margaret's daughter, barely 16, speaks casually about washing her hair monthly rather than seasonally, treating this as normal rather than revolutionary. indicating that generational change might accomplish what medical advice and religious pressure couldn't, making cleanliness seem natural rather than dangerous or vain. The plague's aftermath has left lasting changes in community attitudes towards sanitation, as survivors have maintained some of the hygiene practices that terror motivated during the worst outbreaks. Public spaces remain cleaner than before 1348, and people continue washing their hands more frequently, suggesting that extreme circumstances can create permanent behavioral changes that outlast their original motivation. New trade routes bring exotic soaps and oils from distant lands, making cleanliness supplies more available to those who can afford them, while also introducing new ideas about personal hygiene from cultures that never abandoned regular bathing. The merchant class, always eager to embrace profitable innovations, begins investing in cleanliness as both personal practice and business opportunity. You recognize that you're witnessing the beginning of changes that will transform human civilization, though the full implications remain hidden in a future you'll never see. As night settles over your medieval town, the familiar sounds of another day ending drift through your window. The distant clatter of chamber pots being emptied, the soft murmur of evening prayers, and the gentle rustling of straw mattresses as families settle in for sleep. The candle beside your bed flickers in the draught, casting dancing shadows that seem to whisper of all the changes coming to this world of ours. Changes that will transform everything about how humans think about cleanliness, health, and the simple dignity of being clean. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep in your world of unwashed wool and aromatic challenges, you can almost sense the future approaching like dawn on the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, in times yet to come, people will step into warm showers each morning, brush their teeth with mint-flavored paste, and change their clothes daily without considering it miraculous. They'll live in a world where soap is abundant, where medical knowledge has moved beyond bleeding and prayer, where children grow up taking cleanliness for granted in ways that would seem impossible to your medieval eyes. But for now, in this moment, you're part of a world that's doing its best with what it has, where people find dignity and community despite the aromatic challenges, where love and friendship flourish even when everyone smells like they've been personally wrestling with agriculture. Your ancestors aren't dirty because they're lazy or ignorant. They're navigating a world where every choice about cleanliness involves complex calculations about health, resources, and survival that modern people can barely imagine. So as you settle into your straw mattress, listening to the gentle symphony of medieval night sounds, remember that you're witnessing humanity at its most resourceful, finding ways to build civilization and create meaning, even under conditions that would challenge the hardiest modern survivor. In a few hundred years, people will look back at this time with a mixture of horror and admiration, understanding finally that cleanliness isn't just about soap and water. It's about the human capacity to adapt, survive, and find joy even in the most aromatic circumstances. Sweet dreams, and may your modern showers feel extra luxurious tomorrow morning, knowing now what your ancestors went through just to get moderately clean. Rest well, knowing that every squeeze of shampoo is a small miracle that took centuries to achieve, and that somewhere in the past, your medieval ancestors are dreaming of futures they could never quite imagine, but somehow helped create through their remarkable resilience and stubborn refusal to let a little dirt defeat the human spirit. Sleep now, and let the gentle hum of modern life carry you into dreams where cleanliness is simple, abundant, and wonderfully, perfectly ordinary.